Good afternoon, Div 2. Continuing chapter 17 of Trevor Noah's autobiography. This is by far and away the longest chapter in the whole book. It's going to take me several videos to get through it. So anyway, reading where we left off in chapter 17, which was entitled My Mother's Life. We worked and worked and worked, but no matter how many hours we put in, the business kept losing money. Everything was lost. We couldn't even afford real food. There was one month, I'll never forget, the worst month of my life. We were so broke that for weeks we ate nothing but bowls of morogo, which is a kind of wild spinach cooked with caterpillars. Mopane worms, they're called. Mopane worms are literally the cheapest thing that only the poorest of poor people eat. I grew up poor, but there's poor and then there's wait, I'm eating worms poor. Mopane worms are the sort of thing where even people in Soweto would be like, ew, no. They're these spiny, brightly colored caterpillars the size of your finger. They have black spines that prick the roof of your mouth. And when you bite into one, it's not uncommon for its yellow-green excrement to squirt into your mouth. Remember that next time you guys complain about your food. For a while, I sort of enjoyed the caterpillars. It was like a food adventure. But then over the course of weeks, eating them day in, day out, I just couldn't take it anymore. I wanted to throw up. I snapped and ran to my mom crying. I don't want to eat caterpillars anymore. That night, she scrapped some money together and bought us chicken. As poor as we'd been in the past, we'd never been without food. That was the period of my life I hated the most. Work all night, sleep in some random car, wake up, wash up in the janitor's sink, brush my teeth in that little metal basin, brush my hair in the rear view mirror of a Toyota, then try to get dressed without getting oil or grease all over my school clothes so that the kids at school wouldn't know that I lived inside a garage. Oh, I hated it so much. I hated cars. I hated sleeping in cars. I hated working on cars. I hated getting my hands dirty. I hated eating worms. I hated it all. I didn't hate my mom or even Abel, funnily enough, because I saw how hard everybody was working. But eventually, I started to see why the business was ragingly money. I used to go around and buy auto parts for Abel, and I learned that he was buying his parts on credit. The vendors were charging him a crazy markup. The debt was crippling the company, and instead of paying off the debt, he was drinking what little cash he made. Brilliant mechanic, horrible businessman. At a certain point, to try to save the garage, my mother quit her job at ICI and stepped in to help Abel run the shop. She brought her office skills to the garage full-time and started keeping the books, making the schedule, balancing the accounts. And it was all going well until Abel started to feel like she was running the business. People started commenting on it as well. Clients were getting the cars on time. Vendors were getting paid on time. And they would say, hey, Abby, this workshop is going so much better now that your wife has taken over. Well, that didn't help. We lived in the workshop for close to a year. And then my mom had had enough. She was willing to help Abel, but not if he was going to drink all the profits. She had always been independent and self-sufficient. She'd lost that part of herself at the mercy of someone else's failed dream. At a certain point, she said, I can't do this anymore. I'm out of this. I'm done. She went out and got a job as a secretary with a real estate developer, and somehow between that and borrowing against whatever equity was left in Abel's workshop, she was able to get us the house in Highlands North. We moved. The workshop was seized by Abel's creditors, and that was the end of that. Growing up, I suffered no shortage of my mom's old school, Old Testament discipline. She spared no rod and spoiled no child. With Andrew, she was different. He got spankings at first, But they tapered off and eventually stopped. When I asked her why I got beatings and Andrew didn't, she made a joke about it, like she did with everything else. I beat you like that because you could take it, she said. I can't hit your little brother the same way because he's a skinny little stick. He'll just break, you know. But you, God gave you that bottom for a whipping. Even though she was kidding, I could tell that the reason she didn't beat Andrew was because she'd had a genuine change of heart on the matter. It was a lesson she'd learned, oddly enough, from me. I grew up in a world of violence, but I myself was never violent. Yes, I played pranks and set fires and broke windows, but I never attacked people. I never hit anybody. I was never angry. I just didn't see myself that way. My mother had exposed me to a different world than the one she grew up in. She bought me the books that she never got to read. She took me to the schools that she never got to go to. I immersed myself in the words, and I came back looking at the world differently. I saw that not all families are violent. I saw the futility of violence, the cycle that just repeats itself, the damage it inflicted on people that they in turn inflict on others. I saw more than anything that relationships are not sustained by violence, but by love. Love is a creative act. When you love someone, you create a new world for them. My mother did that for me. And with the progress I made and the things I learned, I came back and created a new world and a new understanding for her. After that, she never raised her hand to her children again. Unfortunately, by the time she stopped, Abel had started. I was in 6th grade, my last year at Maryvale. We'd moved to Highlands North, and I'd gotten in trouble at school for forging my mom's signature on some document. There was some activity I didn't want to participate in, so I'd signed the release form with her name on it to get out of it. The school called my mom, and she asked me about it when I got home that afternoon. I was certain she was going to punish me. But this turned out to be one of those times when she didn't seem to care. She said I should have just talked to her. She would have signed the form for me. Then Abel, who'd been sitting in the kitchen with us, watching the whole thing, said, "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" Then he took me into this tiny room, a walk-in pantry off the kitchen, and he closed the door behind us. He was standing between me and the door. But I didn't think anything of it. It didn't occur to me to be scared. Abel had never tried to discipline me before. He'd never even given me a lecture. It was always, "Maybe your son did this," and then my mother would handle it. And this was in the middle of the afternoon. He was completely sober, which made what happened next even more terrifying. The first blow hit me in the ribs. He'd never learned how to fight. I'd never learned how to fight. But I had this instinct that told me to get in close. I had seen what those long arms could do. I'd seen him take down my mom, but more important, I'd seen him take down grown men. Abel never hit people with a punch. I never saw him punch another person with a closed fist. But he had this ability to hit a grown man across the face with an open hand, and they'd crumble. He was that strong. I looked at his arms and I knew, don't be on the other end of those things. I ducked in close, and he kept hitting and hitting. But I was in too tight for him to land any solid blows. Then he caught on, and he stopped hitting and started trying to grapple and wrestle me. He grabbed the skin on my arms and pinched it between his thumb and forefingers and twisted hard. It hurt. I had never been that scared before, ever, because there was no purpose to it. That's what made it so terrifying. It wasn't discipline. Nothing about it was coming from a place of love. It didn't feel like something that would end with me learning a lesson about forging my mother's signature. It felt like something that would end when he wanted it to end. When his rage was spent, it felt like there was something inside him that wanted to destroy me. Abel was much bigger and stronger than me, but being in a confined space was to my advantage. because he didn't have the room to maneuver. As he grappled and punched, I somehow managed to twist and wriggle my way around him and slip out the door. I was quick, but Abel was quick as well. He chased me. I ran out of the house and jumped over the gate, and I ran and I ran and I ran. The last time I turned around, he was rounding the gate, coming out of the yard after me, until I turned 25 years old. I had a reoccurring nightmare of the look on his face as he came around that corner. I ran like the devil was chasing me. Abel was bigger and faster, but this was my neighborhood. He couldn't catch me in my neighborhood. I knew every alley, I knew every street, every wall to climb over, every fence to slip through. I was ducking through traffic, cutting around yards. I had no idea when he gave up because I never looked back. I ran and ran and ran as far as my legs could carry me. I was in Bramley, 3 neighborhoods away, before I stopped. I found a hiding place in some bushes and crawled inside and huddled there for what felt like hours. You don't have to teach me a lesson twice. From that day on, until the day I left home, I lived like a mouse in that house. If Abel was in a room, I was out of the room. If he was in one corner, I was in the other corner. If he walked into a room, I would get up and act like I was going to the kitchen. Then, when I re-entered the room, I would make sure I was close to the door. He would be in the happiest, friendliest mood. Didn't matter. Never again did I let him come between me and a door. Maybe a couple of times after that, I was sloppy and he'd land a punch or a kick before I could get away, but I never trusted him again, not for a moment. When Mighty Mechanics went under, Abel had to get his cars out. Someone was taking over the property. There were liens against his assets, and it was a mess. That's when he started running his workshop out of our yard. It's also when my mother divorced him. In African culture, there's legal marriage and traditional marriage. Just because you divorce someone legally doesn't mean they are no longer your spouse. Once Abel's debts and his terrible business decisions started affecting my mother's credit and her ability to support her sons, she wanted out. I don't have debts, she says. I don't have bad credit. I'm not doing these things with you. You were still a family, and they were still traditionally married, but she divorced him to separate their financial affairs. She also took her name back. Because Abel had started running an unlicensed business in a residential area, one of the neighbors filed a petition to get rid of us. My mom applied for a license to be able to operate a business on the property. Sorry about that, guys. It's just the other teachers getting a hold of me. I'll finish this up. Where am I for time? Yeah, we're good. My mom applied for a license to be able to operate a business on the property. The workshop stayed, but Abel kept running it into the ground, drinking his money. At the same time, my mother started moving up at the real estate company she worked for, taking on more responsibilities and earning a better salary. Abel's workshop became like a side hobby almost. He was supposed to pay for Andrew's school fees and groceries, but he started falling behind on that, and soon my mom was paying for everything. She paid for the electricity, she paid the mortgage, he literally contributed nothing. Alrighty, so there's chapter 17 continued, and I'll continue it again when I have a chance next. Hope you enjoyed it.